Conceptual Options is honored to speak to two of England's most prominent and outspoken proponents of surrogacy in the gay community. I'd like to introduce you to Michael and Wes. Michael is the co-founder of twodads.uk, which is an organization which helps intended fathers in the UK achieve their dreams of fatherhood via surrogacy. Michael is a surrogacy advocate and is tirelessly working for change with regards to surrogacy in the UK. He also helps run a same-sex parents page on Facebook and speaks at national fertility events and contributes to the charity Surrogacy UK. He has a parenting column in Fertility Road magazine and also has contributed to the website Gays with Kids. Wes is the father of their eldest child from a previous straight marriage and actively supports the LGBTQ community with Michael. Wes works full-time for a football club in the UK. Michael and Wes were invited to speak to a parliamentary group on their experience of being two dads going through the surrogacy process. Both have made it their mission to normalize the journey of same-sex parenting. Welcome, Michael and Wes. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
The very first thing that we need to do is we need to congratulate you on the fifth member of your family, Duke.
Yes, he's a week old today.
Oh my God, congratulations. I want to also just let everybody know that Tallulah and Duke are in the same room doing their best to be quiet, but they're young, and so we're going to do the best we can to make it a family affair without it being too crazy, right?
We're going to try our best.
So let's start with the basics. Tell me a little bit about how you two met and how long you've been together.
Can we take that one?
No, I'll do it. So Michael and I met at Pride in our local town. Well, I say town, it's a city. It's Birmingham in the UK. And it was in 2012. So we've been together now for 7 years and we've been married for 5.
Yeah, we have.
What is it like in the UK in terms of marriage and acceptance of gay marriage there?
I think we're really lucky, if I'm honest. We got married in 2014, which was the first year that gay marriage was legalized in the UK. And we had an incredible ceremony with all our friends and family there. It was amazing. And I think generally in the UK, we're really fortunate that the majority of society is really accepting when it comes to gay marriage, and we're fortunate to live in a country that welcomes and welcomes us with open arms when it comes to that.
But also the law protects us as well. So we live in a country where the law protects our right to be married.
Yeah.
Which has just happened in the United States, and it just must be a huge weight off of your shoulders. I mean, talk about some of the things that means for you as parents and as a married couple, what it means to be protected, because I think a lot of people don't understand kind of the human things about what it means to be protected under the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even if you just go back to 2010, I think it was, when surrogacy was permitted for gay couples. You know, prior to that, the law didn't allow gay men to apply for a parental order, which is ultimately the piece of paper which gives you the legal status of the child, of your child, which isn't that long ago. Now, obviously, we've got the Equal Marriage Act here now, and you know that I think that's the icing on the cake for a lot of gay and lesbians in the UK, because it just gives us that level of equality that you know, Section 28 here in the UK and everything else. It just makes it a safer place generally for us to be who we are.
And I think the other thing, just to add to that, is talk about what that means for the kids.
Well, it means that we're protected. So should there, in the horrific event that there should be any hate given to us, or we come under any type of attack there, you know, we're protected by law first and foremost. That, you know, any type of abuse is unacceptable and protected by law.
I think it's pretty reassuring though as parents that if that was to ever happen, we would have the support of the law behind us. And I think there are some countries in the world where you couldn't say that and you couldn't have that reassurance. And I think it would be challenging to bring children up in countries such as those. So I think we're very fortunate that we are protected by law, and it also gives us that comfort, and it allows us just to actually get on with our lives and be parents and not have to worry about those elements that some other countries have to worry about.
Yeah, you almost lose the label, or the sexuality becomes irrelevant, you know, because we just want to be parents. We just want to parent our children. We don't want to be branded as same-sex parents, although we are. It'll be nice that when the time comes that label can just fall away and we're just parents.
Yeah, I mean, we do, you know, you do have it bounced around as same-sex parents, which is what we are, but you don't bounce it around saying it's straight parents or heterosexual parents. Yeah. It's never a label for them, so why should it be a label for us? Mm-hmm. So hopefully that will change, and we'll just be known as, you know, parents to our 3 children.
Be known as a couple of good parents who love their kids and are raising kids that are happy and healthy. And I guess that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk just a little bit about the law, is really, in a sense, going through this in America just recently, it's the next step toward normalization, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely that. It's part of the work that we do. It's like destigmatizing, really, and it's mainly destigmatizing to an audience that doesn't understand or doesn't want to understand or is afraid of. So we're kind of putting our life out there for everyone to view and to pick and to comment on, but it's to help and support other couples like us in similar situations, or even those that are too afraid to stick their head above the parapet. We want to show the world and the community that we're great parents. It's achievable. When you want something and dream for something that bad, we can, you know, anything's within reach, and that's kind of what we want to demonstrate.
And I want our kids to look back when they're a bit older and say that, you know, we did the right thing.
Yeah. And that they were proud of us for doing this and leading this, you know, motion and being involved in the law commissioners and helping create and make change. That's what we want our kids to remember us for.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think that it's such a huge thing for you being willing to do that from both the perspective of the gay community and the people that are learning and want to come to this level of acceptance, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then also, it's clear to me that you guys are really connected to helping people in the straight community to find why this is important and why it's okay, and to be in a place where they don't have to be concerned, they don't have to have fears, because you're giving them an education.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about changing people's perceptions, because until you actually are exposed to a same-sex family or see how we behave or how normal we actually are, I say that in loose terms, but until people physically see that, you don't change perceptions from not educating people. Unless you educate people and show them that actually we're just like anyone else, that allows them to change perceptions.
Yeah. And I think that it really helps to eliminate the fear, which is really at the root of all of that, isn't it?
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about where you are today. You've just had a baby, another baby, 5 kids, Katie, Tallulah, and Duke. 3 kids, five member family. What's it like? What are you surprised by these days?
Well, actually, you ask what it's like, and actually, we're still getting used to actually having another little one in the family. Yeah. So having Duke has brought back all those emotions and all of that kind of things that I think you'd blocked out when Tallulah was born and when Tallulah was younger. But it hit us like a train last week.
It did, and I think I'd forgotten how painful sleep deprivation can be. But then I see Duke and I see Tallulah and I see Katie, and I see how our hearts are all stretched by this other human being in our life. And he's touched us all completely differently. Now, at the moment, we're absolutely shattered. But when he catches us in that certain way, or we see Tallulah just beaming with love for her brother, it's just incredible. And it makes me proud, and it makes me glad that we've done this and we've worked hard to achieve this, because it's been a long journey, and this isn't something that happens overnight. When we want children, we have to plan meticulously to make it happen. Yeah. So there are
it's a never an easy route, is it? And
no,
and also there was lots of anticipation around what our family unit would be like with another member in it, and it's kind of a little bit more than we expected, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And Tallulah's out of nappies now, out of diapers now, and she sleeps well. She's doing really well at nursery. So things, we were getting our life back to normal. And then, and then this little joy called Duke came along, and we're just doing it all again.
And you were going to be really shocked at how easy it is, how much easier it is this time around. What were you going to say?
I think it's, for us as a couple, we have to really want a family, or to extend our family. This is not something that you do lightly, because there's so much you have to go through to get to this stage. Not just emotionally, financially, but also you're also putting another family through this as well.
Yeah.
So our surrogates family, it's not a case of it just being us, and it's never just a case of just being the surrogate. It's the whole surrogates family are going through this process with us for the duration of that pregnancy. So it's a lot of responsibility as a couple. It's not just about us. If it was just our own kind of emotions we were dealing with and our own financials we were dealing with, then we would take less, we wouldn't view it as much. But I think when you're working with another family who rely on all of those things and are going through the same types of emotion, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it is.
Let's back up just a little bit and talk about the whole process. And let's start with, when you decided to have children, what was that process like for you? And then, let's walk through actually going to figure out surrogacy and all of that.
Sure. So
when I met Michael talked to me about children from a very early age. Sorry, not an early age, but from very early in our relationship.
Yeah. I wanted children, and I needed to make sure that the next person that I met that I really liked, I needed to know if they wanted kids. Because I just spent a long time in a relationship with someone that didn't, and I really liked him, and I knew I would be with him forever. So I needed to know if he wanted children. And obviously when I found out he had kids, I was like, brilliant. And then when I found out he wanted children, I was like, this is great. So we researched surrogacy. When we say we mean me. Researched surrogacy, international surrogacy, first of all. So we looked at all of the other options and countries available to us. And we spent nearly 3 years looking at all of the various options before we started the journey. So we looked at India, Thailand, Nepal, the US, Canada, Mexico, the Ukraine, Northern Cyprus. We were going to international fertility conferences just to weigh up the options. And we just didn't concentrate enough on the UK, because we were unsure what we wanted that journey to look like.
And I think also we were unsure of whether it was viable,
whether
in
it's
the
even
UK,
possible,
and whether there was enough surrogates, and whether it was something that was going to be viable.
Because there's one of the things, and one of the reasons why we set up Two Dads is because of the limited limited resource that's available online for intended fathers. You know, there's virtually none. So hence why we spent so long doing so much research. So once we realized that the UK was viable and it wasn't illegal, because that's the most preconception, is that it's illegal. Well, yes, commercial surrogacy is illegal, but altruistic surrogacy, like Canada, is perfectly legal. So we started to explore that a little bit more, and we eventually decided that that felt right and was the better option for us. So we could be involved in all of those scan appointments. We could go to the embryo transfer. We could see our baby growing inside the surrogate, and we could be there and support her and her family. So the UK option was the right choice for us.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes us up till sort of 2015, I reckon. So after we got married in August 2014, towards the end of that year was when we were like, right, okay, let's start putting ourselves out there. Let's see how do we even find a surrogate? And that's when the journey started.
So, I mean, that is a whole lot of planning. You did a couple of years of planning before you were even married and still had a year to go ish.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's like what Wes said a minute ago. You know, there's so much planning involved in this, and there are no accidental children born in gay relationships. You know, we have to, if you want them biologically and even to adopt or to foster, the preparation and the planning is key. And we didn't want to make a mistake. So we wanted to make sure we did what was right for us.
I imagine that making a mistake is a multi-year problem. In other words, if I make a mistake or I miscarry, something like that, I'm not years out. And I imagine that you're at least a year or two out from the time that if you make a mistake.
Yeah. And, you know, we did have an issue with a failed transfer the second time round when we were trying for Duke. And that cost us dearly financially, because we didn't just have a failed transfer, we ended up losing 5 embryos all on the same time. So that entire IVF cycle and all of those eggs we just lost in an instant. So these are very expensive mistakes and we don't want to make them. So hence why we need to be belts and braces and make sure we do it properly.
So talk a little bit about finding a surrogate and what the process was of actually making the decision and the things that went into the decision. I just can't even imagine how huge of a decision this is in terms of really finding a comfort level and that this is going to make sense, and that, I mean, you're really making a lifetime commitment at some level with a surrogate, aren't you?
You really are. And that's exactly the way to go into this. This is not here, you know, because of altruistic surrogacy and surrogacy generally, you know, yes, there are bad cases and it can go wrong, but where it goes right, it's down to the relationship being perfect. It's down to investing that time with that surrogate to build a friendship, because that woman and her family are going to welcome you and they are going to give you that gift of your child. And you have to go into this with your eyes wide open. And where it often falls down or goes wrong is where people don't behave like that. So our advice to couples is to invest in that time in getting to know your surrogate. And we only ever met one surrogate, and that was the surrogate that had both of our children. And we have a saying in our relationship, and from the day we met, it just felt right. So we're very much into what, you know, your gut tells you at a certain point. And meeting her and speaking to her, there was just a sign. It just felt right that this was the woman that was going to complete our family.
Early on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As soon as we met them, we met them by, you know, Michael can talk through how, you know, we got to actually meeting them. But when we first physically met them, we went out for dinner, and it just was very easy. We just got along really well, and it did just feel right. There was no apprehension or there was no concerns, and since from then to now, she's been our surrogate for our 2 children, and we'll be eternally grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine the other thing is that you have to take into consideration is not only in your case are you dealing with the surrogate and wanting to create that relationship. In your case, isn't she married?
She is, yeah.
And so there's that consideration, not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's, all of a sudden 2 becomes 4 in this whole process.
Yeah. And she had 4 children, or has 4 children. So it was important that we introduced Katie to her children, because this, whilst, our surrogate was a gestational, or she was a host, she was a carrier. So it wasn't her eggs. So we had an egg donor as well. But regardless, we were entering into a lifelong friendship, I guess. And it was just a case of making sure that everybody was on the same page, everybody was comfortable. Because if any party in those 2 families was uncomfortable, then it's not meant to be. And we spent that time going on days out, going for meals, meeting for coffee. And she lived 2 hours drive away from where we were, so not too far. So we made and we invested that time to get to know. And that's exactly what we did for about 8-9 months before we started any fertility treatment.
No kidding, 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
And talk, I want to ask you a couple of questions, but the first one is just talk about the role that distance away played for you guys in making this decision. Was there advantages to that she was a couple of hours away, or did that make it more stressful for you?
Yeah, it kind of did make it more stressful for us, particularly around the time when she was about to give birth. But generally, it's not a long way off, but with technology nowadays, you can kind of still keep in contact on a regular basis and use technology to aid that. Yeah. So that's exactly what we did. We would talk most days, and it's all about finding the right level, what's right for your surrogate in terms of how often you communicate, and what's right for us. It's kind of finding that balance. And I think we found it pretty early on.
Yeah, we did. And I think that's a really important point, because what's right for us, we know several people, and we've counseled several people that have been through surrogacy. And some surrogates don't want to be pestered. They don't want the over contact. They might not be a fluffy, tactile type of character, of which I am, and of which Wes is. So finding that level of I guess that personal space and understanding is really, really important. And 2 hours journey in the US, that's nothing. In the UK, 2 hours is a bit of a journey. And like Wes said, stressful at point of pregnancy, but in terms of the getting to know, I think it worked. I think it was a nice distance. It's important to remember that we all have lives outside of surrogacy, and neither one of us wanted to live in each other's pocket. So we had a very good understanding that we have our separate lives, but ultimately there are 2 people, 2 humans that have been created that will bring those 2 lives together at some point.
So talk just a little bit about how you came to the decision. I know that it felt right, and I think that's huge. Obviously, you didn't want to make this a purely financial transaction, and I imagine you would counsel anybody away from that. But when you think about the process for finding this person and then saying they're the right one, beyond it feeling right, which I think is the most important, what were the other determining factors that you guys had to look at?
I think it's about the surrogate's lifestyle, their choices, how they live their life, their diet. It's all of those things are really important, because they're going to potentially carry your child for 9 months. So you want to make sure and have the reassurance and comfort that they're going to do everything that's in the best interest of the child. And I think that they were some of the conversations we had pretty early on, even before we met up with our surrogate. Some of those questions, going back and forth via messages around trying to understand about values, trying to understand about health, and trying to understand about all of those elements. Lifestyle is really important.
Yeah, and one of the things which really warmed us to her from the get-go really was she was adamant she wanted to do this for a gay couple. And and her reasons for that were around family creation and how difficult it is for men particularly that want a family. So that really resonated with us.
Because not all surrogates want to have children for same-sex couples. It's that's a choice people make.
And there are surrogates that will refuse to do a journey for a gay couple, and that's their choice. So that's right. It is what it is. But yeah, lifestyle was really important, and when someone's a kind soul, when someone has a good heart. You just, we can all see that, and you see that in her. Her soul is just adorable, and I couldn't think of anyone better to carry our children.
Actually, we're very lucky to have found her.
We're so lucky to have found her.
And how did you find her?
So there are a number of ways that you can network with surrogates in the UK. There are three main not-for-profits that operate. One of them, which I do a fair bit of work for, is Surrogacy UK. And there are two others. There's COTS and Brilliant Beginnings.
Because you can't openly and actively advertise for a surrogate in the UK?
Yeah, it's illegal in the UK to advertise for a surrogate under the Surrogacy Arrangements Act of 85, which is currently up for reform. But what you can do is that you can approach one of the not-for-profits, and they can have getting to know you sessions or networking events, or they can have a matching service. Now, back in 2015, all of their books were closed for new registrations because there were not enough surrogates and far too many intended parents. So that meant we had to do what's known as the independent route, and that's find our own surrogate, find our own clinic, and do everything ourselves, which we were fine with because we just spent a number of years doing a ton of research, so we were quite clued up with what to do. So what first was surprising is the number of closed, safe Facebook groups that exist for surrogacy in the US and in Europe. So I became a member in the majority of those groups, and I began talking to and building relationships with a number of surrogates, just chatting online. And as well as that, there's also a couple of online networking profiles outside of Facebook, almost like an intended parent or a sperm donation or an egg donation matching service online. And we registered with one of those services. And that's how we found our surrogate. She approached us after reading our profile. And we'd had our profile for about a month. And she contacted us. And I really liked what she had to say. And I loved that she had a family and she homeschooled her kids. And she had a successful equestrian business. She was really into the outdoor life and horses. And we just got that feeling like, yeah, we need to meet her. And we did about a month or two later. And then the process began of getting to know her. And it was probably about 6 to 8 weeks after that, we kind of then started saying to her, yeah, I think we want to continue to invest in this because this feels right. And she felt the same.
Because some couples, they invest a lot of time and energy into surrogates, and then they get so far down the line, and then the relationship fails, and then they have to start again. So it is quite challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, by just continuing to talk exclusively to one surrogate, you are kind of then putting all your eggs in one basket, shall we say. But for us, there was no question. It just did feel right. Mm-hmm. And we just continued with comfort having the conversations with our surrogate.
Yeah.
Very cool. I mean, obviously you must feel very lucky when you see what other couples have gone through in terms of finding a surrogate, and that I can't even imagine how difficult that must be to lose one in the process. So let's talk a little bit about an egg donor. You know, all of these things that we just kind of, in the straight community, we don't think about any of this, do we?
No, you've got it so easy at
So
times.
easy. Until you have the kids, and then it's all the same, isn't it?
Then it's the same.
Talk a little bit about the process of an egg donor, which I hadn't even considered.
Well, first of all, we were shocked at how expensive eggs were.
Yeah.
Because we obviously need to buy eggs, and
Yeah.
you know, they were very expensive.
Yeah.
And you know, that was one of the things that we hadn't really, you know,
didn't even understand. And when we were looking into the international market, that's when it really shocked us that, you know, eggs can go for $25,000.
Wow.
And we were like, oh wow. So when we found a clinic that we really liked, that particular clinic luckily had a really good egg bank.
Because sometimes you can wait for quite a long period of time. If you're quite specific about
Mhm.
the donor's characteristics, or the characteristics that you want, and the clinics don't have those characteristics, you can sometimes wait for quite a while.
Because in the UK, egg donation, or donation generally, sperm or egg, is non-anonymous. So what that means is that you'll never know the donation. You'll never know their donor's name or their photograph or where they live. And when the donor donates, it becomes non-anonymous in the fact that when that child becomes 18 years old, they get full disclosure should the child want it. Now, unlike in the States or in parts of other places in Europe where you can see a photograph of your donor, we can't do that in the UK. That's where egg donation is anonymous. So you give your clinic criteria, of which we were quite particular on eye color and hair color and height and skin tone.
Because what we decided to do was that Michael's the biological father of Tallulah. So we decided that what we wanted to do is, if we could have children of our own, biologically, we chose my characteristics, so that we had as close to what we could have naturally if we were to have children.
So Tallulah's donor was blonde, blue, fair, same as him, same as Katie, because we wanted that similarity within our family unit, and we got that. We couldn't have got that any more so than what we have. You know, so many people think Tallulah is biologically Wes is, which is exactly what we wanted to achieve. So the clinic found our egg donor, and it took them about 4 months to find a donor that was known to the clinic. So that meant that they'd already had fertility treatment with them and their eggs were viable. So we got matched to a donor, and I fertilized those eggs. We got 4 blastocysts out of 5 eggs. So we did really well in terms of the conversion. And we transferred 1, obviously, and we got a positive pregnancy after 14 days. So we were one of the lucky ones. It worked first time.
Yeah.
And
we hear stories of, you know, of other gay couples who've had 4 or 5 attempts, spent, you know, a crazy amount of money, and still not have a positive pregnancy at the end of it. So, you know, we do realize how lucky we were with Tallulah, you know, that first time.
But I think that luck also comes down to how much we planned. You know, we didn't just choose the first clinic that we saw. We did our research into the best fertility clinics in the area. You know, we looked at the HFEA live birth rates to see which clinics not only were experiencing surrogacy, not only were respectful of the LGBT community, but also had a really good above average live birth rate. And we picked a clinic that ticked all of those boxes, and we got what the desired outcome was.
And you know, like most organizations, there are the cheaper ends and there are the higher ends. You know, the clinic that we chose wasn't the cheapest, but we're investing a lot of emotion and money into this, so we want to give it the best chance, which is why we chose the clinic we did.
I am so amazed at the number of decisions that have to go into this, and then that it can all fall apart. I just, it's it's huge. I mean, it
Mhm.
really is about as intentional a thing as you can do, isn't it?
It is, and you know, fertility treatment is so stressful, and not enough people talk about it because it's a taboo subject. People fear that it makes them inferior or less of a man or less of a woman if you are struggling to conceive. And one of the things that we do with Two Dads is we take away that fear of talking about infertility. And we've done work with some amazing organizations, Fertility Fest being one of them, where we talk about you know, male factor infertility or female factor infertility, and we bring the topics together with humor where you can, and we shed some light on what can be a really stressful point in a marriage or relationship.
And yeah,
and not actually, you know, taking into account the grueling time and that a surrogate has to go through with fertility. You know, she's doing this voluntarily without any gain. You know, it's not her child. So, you know, the selfless act of actually going through fertility treatment is, you know, it's very grueling.
It's hard.
Yeah. Now, just to be clear, one of the things you talked about was commercial surrogacy versus altruistic surrogacy. What's the difference between the two?
So here in the UK, we don't have commercial surrogacy. So the difference between the two is that organizations can't profit, or surrogates can't profit from surrogacy. So we don't have commercial agreements between a surrogate and an intended parent, or a clinic and an intended parent or surrogate. Now, altruistic means it's purely through donation. So the surrogate can be compensated reasonable expenses only, and not profit through surrogacy. So reasonable expenses in the UK for surrogacy is around between £12,000 and £16,000 per pregnancy. That's
Wow.
what's seen as reasonable expenses.
And go ahead.
And that's massively different to what it is in the US.
And I imagine that the benefit of that is that what you end up with is somebody as a surrogate who has their heart in the game in a much bigger way. Is that true?
Absolutely that. And and there's a saying, and it's a phrase that's coined by Surrogacy UK, and it's to do with love. You know, surrogacy is all built on love and friendship, and it's exactly that, because it really is. And surrogates aren't motivated by money in the UK, and it's fine if there are surrogates that do this as a career and do it because they're compensated well. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm more comfortable that our family was created through altruistic surrogacy, and that our surrogate wasn't motivated by the money.
Let's talk a little bit about the process from the time that your surrogate has a baby growing inside of her and until delivery. There must be some real milestones. And I imagine at some point you have to say, oh my gosh, this is really happening, or some kind of a milestone where you really get a sense of how important this is. Talk a little bit about that, would you?
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, that milestone moment is because when you're going through fertility treatment and once you've had an embryo implanted, very early on you do a lot of scans to just like multiple days to see whether it's taken on all of those things. For me, it was once we'd got a positive test and seeing the heartbeat in very early on when it was
4 weeks after transfer,
seeing that heartbeat and hearing the heartbeat at such an
at 4 weeks, a 4 weeks transfer, you see and hear that, you know,
I can remember hearing it now because
Yeah.
we wasn't expecting to hear it.
No, it stunned us
Just
both.
really the room, and we were like,
It
wow.
filled the room. This booming sound filled the room.
And it was our baby's heartbeat
Yeah,
at 4 weeks. And it was like, oh my God, this is real.
Yeah.
Look what we've created.
Yeah. As Wes says, the great thing is you're scanned then at 6 weeks, you're scanned at 8 weeks, you're scanned at 10 weeks, and then you're scanned at 12 weeks when you're released into the, what is our NHS system, National Health System. And then you're in the NHS, you're scanned at 12 weeks, you're scanned at 20 weeks, and that's usually it, depending on the age of the woman. And we were scanned a few more times this time around. But as those scans then start to get more advanced, so you start to see, hands and feet, and then there's 4D scans now. So you get to see your little human whilst they're still in the womb. That's then, weird / incredible, because it's just like, oh my God, this is just incredible.
And I think every time, because it was really important to us that we were there for all those key milestone moments, which is one of the reasons we preferred the UK journey, because we wanted to go to the midwife appointments and we wanted to see, be part of that whole process, because with our surrogate living 2 hours away from us, it would be very easy not to be in touch and feeling all these things happening. So it was really important to us that we went to every midwife appointment and we went to every scan, and we were there supporting our surrogate, which also helped continue to build and grow our relationship. And I think we'd have a different relationship now if we didn't follow that path.
Yeah, agreed. And then I guess when it starts to get real at home, so the nursery gets done, the pram gets delivered, the car seat finally goes in the car,
the bags packed,
then the bags packed, and we have to pack two. We have to pack one for our surrogate that we send to her in case we don't get there in time. And then we buy another one for here. So we have 2 bags that we have to buy. It's very expensive for us guys. And then we have to be doubly prepared because we've got friends that have missed the birth of their child, which must be devastating when you've gone through all of this planning. But fortunately that didn't happen to us. But yeah,
can I just interrupt for just a second? Because I recall seeing a video on your website where you didn't know with Tallulah that you were going to be able to see her being born. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh my God, you must have been so thrilled.
Thrilled doesn't even come into it. It was probably, I would say, it's difficult now because we have more than one child together, but it's probably one of the moments that I know I will remember until the day I die. It was such an experience and a pleasure, and something that we didn't even think was going to happen, because here in the UK, it's policy that when a woman has a cesarean section, only one person is allowed into theatre, and that's usually their partner. But within a surrogacy arrangement, you have their partner if they have one, and then you have 1 or 2 intended parents. And if there are 2, then one of you isn't going to see your child being born. And we never wanted to be the one that did or the one that didn't. So we said, you know what, it's more important that she has her husband with her and she feels safe and secure. So that's what we agreed.
But it was actually, and we only found out this when Duke was born, but because we had the same anaesthetist as when Tallulah was born, and apparently it was Caroline, our surrogate, who actually asked the doctor in theatre staff if we could be present. And we'd actually accepted that we wasn't going to be there, and we were waiting in a side room for our surrogate's husband to bring the baby through. And, you know, it was
just like, it's so emotional for us to talk about, because it was a moment that we thought we would miss. And
we'd accepted.
And we'd accept, and how bad's that we accepted that we would miss the birth of our own child. We accepted it. We bowed down to process and protocol, and was like, do you know what? We'll miss the birth of our child. but we didn't, and we got to see it. And as a result of that, we're doing a greater piece of work now with every NHS hospital in the UK, 134 hospitals, to work with them to change their policy to allow intended parents to see the birth of their child with their surrogate, and if their surrogate wants to bring another person into theatre as well, because it's discriminatory against surrogates and intended parents. So we're working hard to change national policy to make it possible that every couple gets to see the child of their baby being born.
And it just goes to show that it can be done.
Oh, sorry. Hold on just a minute. I'm hitting the wrong. There I am. I'm sorry.
There you go.
I mean, it just goes to show that it wasn't that hard to actually do it, because we were allowed in. And then on our second with Duke, we were allowed in.
Yeah.
So it can be done. And there's no logical reason why we can't be there. So if we can do it twice, why can't it be done as common practice, for all same-sex couples?
My next question is, what was the most expected or the really good parts about surrogacy and the bad parts? And I imagine one of the best parts was getting lucky. I just can't imagine how lucky you guys were to have this surrogate who she really went above and beyond, didn't she?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had an amazing 2 journeys with her. It's been a real experience in getting to know her and her family, so we know we've been lucky.
And there's been highs and lows, hasn't there?
It's challenging.
It's never straightforward.
No.
We're dealing with lots of different people with different, needs and wants, and it's how you navigate through that and still come out at the end with the same goals.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about what it was like, some of the difficulties with the surrogacy process.
So the law in the UK is the biggest frustration. So for those that aren't aware, when a child in the UK is...
I'm just going to quickly check you.
Okay. When a child is born in the UK, and particularly if your surrogate's married, the surrogate and her husband are the legal parents of your child when that child is born. So that's the biggest low at present, because it's frustrating. Now, if you've got a great relationship with your surrogate from the start, then that shouldn't be an issue. That shouldn't be a concern, because genuine surrogates don't want to keep babies. Genuine surrogates want to hand back what's rightfully yours. So yes, the law is a real frustrating time. And the fact that we have to go through the parental order process, which means we submit our application to the court at 6 weeks and 1 day old. So once the baby is 6 weeks and 1 day, we submit our application to the court to start the PO process, the parental order process. And that process is where our surrogate and her husband are removed from the birth certificate and we are added to it. And we then, in the eyes of the law, are the legal parents. And that process from the application being submitted takes about a further 10 weeks. So your child generally is about 4 or 5 months old before this comes to a close, which can be a really stressful time, because in the eyes of the law, that surrogate has that time period to change their mind if that's what they wanted to do. But this is the whole point of getting to know a surrogate well, and to set up reasonable intent and to show intention. So to make sure that you have a document between all parties which sets out the intention of the journey. Should it go pear-shaped, courts can see that there was always an intention to enter into an arrangement of surrogacy.
I'm shocked at the fact that you are not the legal guardians of your children for up to 4 or 5 months. I mean, not only do you have the beginning of the process, which can take years, the actual process of the surrogate being pregnant, but then another 4 or 5 months before you're legally the parents of your children.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, just think of a scenario where you have children that are born and they need some kind of medical intervention. The hospital would get consent from the surrogate and her husband,
And not
from the intended parents, because legally they aren't there. Now, obviously, we made provision for that within our intention document, and we had those quite difficult conversations with our surrogate and her husband about all of these worst case scenarios and what would happen. And unfortunately, those conversations needed to be had. It was prudent for us to do it, and if we didn't do it, we'd be irresponsible. So it was important that we were all on the same page, and we did look for every eventuality and what the plan B would be. We even had conversations around if our surrogate was pregnant and we were both killed, what would be the plan then? And unfortunately, with surrogacy and the way that we chose to create our families, we were always having to be one step ahead and always having to think about things that most people just don't ever have to contemplate.
Yeah, we had to change our wills that should Wes or I be both killed before our child was born, that we had to make provisions for where that child would live. And, you have to think like that, because our surrogate doesn't want this child. It's not biologically hers. She's doing this out of the goodness of her heart. She doesn't want to be left with the child at the end of a journey. So again, it's down to ensuring that relationship is as watertight as it can be. And if it is, then the frustrations with the law shouldn't be a concern. But it is what it is. It's currently, the great news is that the new proposal from the law commissioners of England and Wales and Scotland is really positive. And this new proposed law change is incredible. It's still probably 3 to 4 years of being implemented, but it's definitely a more inclusive, sensible law.
Talk a little bit about the differences. A lot of what you've talked about in terms of, or some of what you've talked about in terms of the considerations surrogate parents have to think about. What are the difference between a straight couple doing this in the UK and a gay couple doing that? And how does that kind of play out?
In terms of the process, it's very, very similar. Certainly from a surrogacy, if you look at the Surrogacy Arrangements Act of 1985, it was later amended to allow same-sex couples to be involved. So there are still safeguarding checks, regardless of whether you're gay or straight. There's still intervention from an organisation, a government organisation called CAFCAS, which they will do home checks and further safeguarding checks on the commissioning couple. So the journeys are very, very similar. Where it gets not complicated, but where it differs is once you're pregnant and you're in the system, because it's hospitals and our NHS system which isn't quite adapted for two men having babies. That's where there's the challenge, and that's where some hospitals will, going back to our first point, will go, well, that's our policy. No, that's not how we do things here. It's this, or lump it. And we're about actually being a bit more, well, no, let's talk about that, because anything's possible. Let's have a rational conversation. Is it because you've never managed a surrogacy arrangement for two men before and you're just being a bit cautious with it, or is that the actual policy? So that's the main difference, because there's lots of protocols around having two men on a maternity ward, for example. So you have to navigate your way through that, which is a little bit different. So generally, that's probably the main difference. Would you agree?
I would, yeah. I think it's about, the mechanics of conception are a little bit different depending on whether they're eggs, it's male factor or female factor. But also then once you are pregnant, it then is quite similar up until the point where you need to manage the birthing plan.
Yeah. It's the birthing plan that needs a little bit more work.
And would you say that most of the differences that you face as a gay couple are more perceptions of what you guys are doing, or not having experience working with a gay couple in surrogacy, or is it more legal in the law?
I think it's probably a bit of both. It's a combination of the two. I mean, and I think it's also about how people's perception of the law, because you know, our NHS trust works to the same law as a lot of other trusts, but they were still able to give us a very positive experience. So that was within the law. But I think it's about the trust and the people working with you being open to having conversations about, you know, I remember being in the early stages of us meeting our consultant, coming away from the meeting and saying to Michael, this doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel right. It's not fair and it doesn't feel right. And it kind of just stuck in my throat that we're not going to accept this. And we didn't. And they did change, because I think it's having the confidence and the ability to be able to challenge and say, no, I'm not going to accept this. This is not right. Because I think a lot of same-sex couples, particularly male, are so
grateful for where they are
to be in that position that they just accept anything.
And that's not us. You know, that's why we're quite outspoken, and you could probably push us more on the activist side, because I'm fine with being called an activist.
But we just won't put up with it.
No, and I want to leave a legacy for other intended fathers, that the work and the path that we paved, and this isn't to be some hero, but this is to ensure that other couples don't have to go through some of the legal expenses that we went through, because we had to send an intention to sue this particular hospital, which cost us thousands of pounds,
because it didn't feel right. And you know, fortunately, when we did that, our initial, you know, intention to sue, it was very early on in our relationship with the trust. But you know, we started open dialogue with them about the things that we really needed to make our pregnancy, and we didn't want anything out of the ordinary.
We weren't asking for this child to be delivered by a swarm of white doves. This was we just wanted a regular pregnancy.
We just wanted the same as everyone else.
And we weren't being given the same as everybody else. You know, when you're told you will have your baby given to you in the car park, because that's what you would have to do, because that's what the law states.
No, the law. It was more about them trying to do everything off the trust's facilities, so they didn't want it to happen on handover
in the hospital. It had to be outside of the hospital, and
we were just like,
no, we're not going to stand for that. But by standing up for that, the Department of Health, which is obviously who acts on behalf of the government, they then re-released updated guidance for surrogates and intended parents and for healthcare professionals, which is what we were involved in February of 2018. And that got re-released 2 years after our child was born, for hospitals to go, do you know what? That was unacceptable before. You guys now need to adopt these new sets of rules.
But that's just the first stage. And although it's guidance, trusts don't have to accept it. So what we're doing now is trying to understand what trusts have adopted the revision in guidance and which trusts have just kept it the same, because we're not, this is something now that we're really passionate about, and I don't think people realize the impact it has on them when they're starting their journey. And you know, going through 2 successful journeys within an NHS Trust hospital, it can be done. So you know, we aren't going to accept a trust telling us that it has to be this and it has to be that. We're going to work tirelessly to make sure that trusts adopt a friendly policy that works for all.
When you talk about trusts, I don't think it's a term that's common in regards to hospitals in the United States. Tell us just a little bit about what that is.
So the word trust, essentially, it means it's a group of hospitals. So a trust might be
it's generally geographically based, isn't it?
Yeah. So every major city has its own trust, and replace the word trust with hospital. That's the most basic thing to understand.
Got it. So the question that I have at this point is, what is it that you would, now being through this twice and understanding a lot of the in and outs, what are some of the most important things that you think a gay couple should be thinking about as they approach this multi-year decision?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing, and we underestimated it massively, and you kind of just mentioned it, and it's like how long this whole process takes, and about having a real clear understanding of the timelines. And this is something that we recommend from a very early stage, because I think often people's perceptions about how long this process is going to take is often very, very much misjudged, primarily because you don't know what you don't know. But for me, one of the big things early on is understanding what this time frame looks like.
And I would say to couples, in fact, someone asked, we did a Q&A session yesterday on our Instagram and Facebook story, and someone asked, what's that timeline? And it's about, from start to finish, I would probably say from deciding you want to do surrogacy to having your child, I'd probably say it's 2 years on average. Sometimes it's longer. But that's what I would say. So I think the time factor is really important. Don't ever underestimate the power of a relationship. It has to be next, because that is where the horror stories occur. That is where you may meet people that might take advantage of you. You're vulnerable, you're childless, you're yearning for this family to be completed, and you don't want to be taken for advantage. And so invest in that relationship. Surrogates are amazing. These women are just incredible human beings, and take the time to get to know them. So that's something I would say would be really, really important. And obviously, the third would be the budget for what you're getting yourself in for. There are a number of ways how surrogacy can be costed, and some people opt for what's known as traditional surrogacy, which is home insemination. So there's no IVF involved, so you instantly don't have that cost and the cost of eggs. So your cost can be halved essentially. So depending on what your budget is or what you have to spend, then that needs to be a factor.
There just so much to consider, isn't there? Now
there is, but I don't want that to kind of put people off, because there is lots to consider, but also equally, you wouldn't go into this kind of arrangement where it involves your future children without doing all of the consideration needed. So there should be lots to consider, because this isn't something that you should do lightly. But equally, once you have considered it, it's relatively straightforward.
It is. You're absolutely right. It's once you, first of all, either know where to get the information or know what experts to speak to or to lean on. The rest, because the clinics in the UK, for example, are more and more clued up with surrogacy than they ever have done. It's the biggest increase in the national statistics from the HFEA of 2017 versus 2016.
And it's only going to go one way.
And it's only increasing. So clinics are more and more aware, and more clinics are having more surrogacy programs now. So once you know what it is you want to do, and you've spoken to either a not-for-profit or someone like us, then that can help navigate the rest of the journey, which then is quite straightforward.
The other question that I have is, what do you want to say to straight people about this process? What do you think it is that they don't understand, or that you'd like them to understand more clearly?
That's a good question. I just want people to be a little bit more respectful and non-judgmental about our right to want to be parents. Now, regardless of who I lie next to, and regardless of my sexual preference, I'm a man that has a need to be a dad. And that's all of our right if we choose to parent. So regardless of your prejudices, I think you need to just be a kind and a decent human being and just see the fact that we all have that yearning in us, and just be respectful of the fact that someone wants children, because we're really good at it. You know, we provide a safe, loving home for our kids, and we're good dads. We parent just like you guys do. Just be a bit more open-minded to this community, which are great at being role models and parents, just like heterosexuals are.
And my view is, and what I would say to a heterosexual couple or someone with prejudice would be, why not? Why not? You know?
Yeah. And bringing that discussion out is the way that you start to break down some of those barriers, because as we've talked about already, so much of the issue that people that don't understand this is rooted in fear, right?
It's fear. Of course it is. Of course it is. Now, whether you know, that's other type of prejudice, and you know, you're seeing it in the US at the minute. You know, we've seen it here. It tends to be fear and ignorance, and
often actually, it's on people not being given the full stories, but they're making lots of assumptions.
Yeah.
And actually, if they stopped for a second and actually realized and took the time to understand exactly what was going on versus their assumptions, then I'd like to think that their rational mind would see a different picture to the one they saw previously.
And we've, this is on the same topic, but it's important to probably say, we had an issue a month ago where we had one of our followers on Instagram that made the effort to contact me. And she quite honestly said that she comes from a homophobic family. She was brought up and taught that homophobia or that gays and lesbians were not a particular great community. So that was taught, that behavior was taught. She thought that gay people having children was wrong. And then she followed our account, and she followed us on Instagram, and she followed us on Facebook, and she saw the journey that we'd been on, and she saw how we'd parent Tallulah, and she sees what a character Tallulah is. And she says it's completely changed her mind on gays parenting, and how it's completely the same, and how she's thoroughly ashamed of what she was taught, but how now she's educating others about what it's like to be gay and to have children. And it just goes to show inclusion starts with education. And this is exactly what we're trying to do, very subtly. You know, we understand that our life and what we do isn't everybody's preference and ideal. We understand and we respect that. But if people want to look in and follow us, then they'll see and they can come along for that journey. And often than not, the feedback's been really positive.
One place that I want to go back to that I think is worth talking a little bit about is, you talked about some of the things that you had to do, like the threat of suing a trust, a hospital trust. Talk about navigating, like, how you have conversation versus becoming somebody who's like, no, this is not okay, and how you walk that line. Because I imagine a big piece of what makes you guys so good at what you're doing in terms of advocacy for gay surrogacy is about how to have conversations that people can hear when it's appropriate, and when I have to really say, now wait a minute, this is just not okay. Talk a little bit about walking that line, would you?
Yeah, I think for us, I recall some of the conversations when we first met with our consultant, and you know, and I'll say it to start with, we didn't have the courage to start with to actually be saying no, and it was all about the feelings, and also we came out thinking this isn't right. We didn't know what to do. we spoke to our lawyer and said, this is how we feel. This is what they're saying. Can you check whether we're being discriminated against? And that's kind of how it started. And then once we had the confidence
yes,
and knew that we had the law behind us, that our lawyer was pretty confident that we were being discriminated against. By the way, we knew we were, but it's about, sense checking and making sure that we're doing the right thing. And then once you have the confidence, I think it's pretty easy to be saying to the hospital, saying, we're not comfortable with this, and we would like you to review it and look at a different way. Now, following on from that, they changed our consultant, we got a new midwife, and the relationship turned on its head.
Yeah, incredible.
And we were being listened to, whereas previously this is the process, you have to fit into it. Well, we're never going to fit into that process, so you need to make a new process for us. And this isn't us being Mariah asking for white lilies and unicorns in the room where our child was born. This is about us saying, we just want a regular experience. We want to experience our child being born. We want to walk out like everyone else does, and we want to just have that same experience. But I think it does come down to having the confidence to be able to do it. But again, I think it's about building that relationship. I mean, we could have easily, started being at loggerheads and, we're running out of time. So it wouldn't have got us anywhere. So I think you do have to take a rational approach to it, and to some extent try and take the emotion out of it and think about logically, how are we going to achieve, we haven't got years to do litigation. It's about, and ultimately this wasn't about us trying to gain anything. It was about just trying to get what we thought we should be getting.
I think about the other piece of advice that I would suggest for people that don't understand two gay dads wanting to have children and a family is that it's no different than what it would be for you if you were a straight person. There's no difference, is there?
No difference.
No different. And we follow lots of same-sex related Instagram accounts, particularly from the US, and we aren't the only ones.
No,
there are thousands, if not millions, of people around the world, same-sex couples who have children. And this is we're not unique here. We're not unique in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay, we should wrap this super educational and really authentic and genuine piece up about you being two gay dads with 3 fabulous children and 1 big happy family.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed. I just can't even begin to tell you. The last thing that I just want you to talk about is where people can find out more information about being and managing and getting through the surrogacy process.
No worries. Okay, so we have a website which is www.twodaddies, that's TWO daddies, daddies.co.uk. And there you'll find our main website with a contact us page as well. And there'll be some helpful videos. And then from there, you'll be able to link into our Facebook, our Twitter, and our Instagram feed. Both Facebook and Instagram is at twodads.u.k.
And you'll see something on there every single day.
Yes.
Because my husband, Michael, bless him, it's not my strength, it's his, is a very
I document
capable
everything.
Social media expert.
Perfect. And then didn't you say you had an Instagram post, or did I miss you telling
Yeah,
you?
Instagram is the same as Facebook. So twodads, TWODADS.u.k.
Michael and Wes, Katie, Tallulah, and Duke, thank you all for what you're doing. I have just tremendous respect for all of what you're doing, and the way that you're doing it obviously is not from any place but love, authenticity, and really just wanting to be no different than anybody else. Is that right?
Perfect. Exactly that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We at Conceptual Options want to thank you so much for your time today, and hope we can do something similar in the not too distant future. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.